There's a question that keeps coming up in conversations about modern dating, and it sounds simple, but the answer is complicated. Why aren't men approaching women anymore? Women notice it. They talk about it with their friends. They post about it online. Where did all the confident men go? Why does no one make a move? Why is everyone just staring at their phones? And men notice something too. They notice that the rules seem to have changed, but no one told them what the new rules are. They notice that what used to be called confidence is now sometimes called harassment. They notice that the signals they used to rely on have become harder to read or have disappeared entirely. Today we're going to talk about why there's a growing disconnect between men and women when it comes to dating, attraction, and relationships. And the answer goes deeper than you might think. All the way back to how humans actually evolved to pair up and how radically different that is from what we're trying to do today. This isn't going to be a video about whose fault it is. Both sides have legitimate grievances. Both sides are confused. What we need is an honest look at why the confusion exists in the first place. Let's start with what's happening on the ground. Large numbers of young men, we're talking significant percentages, have essentially stopped approaching women in person. This isn't laziness. It's not that they don't want relationships or aren't attracted to women. Many of them desperately want connection. But they've developed what can only be described as approach paralysis. An intense anxiety around initiating romantic contact with women they don't already know. The anxiety is real. It's not something they're making up. For these men, the idea of walking up to a woman in public and expressing interest produces genuine fear. Fear of rejection, yes, but increasingly fear of something worse. Fear of being seen as creepy. Fear of making her uncomfortable. Fear of being publicly called out or humiliated. Fear that even a respectful approach will be treated as an offense. Now, approach anxiety has always existed to some degree. Men have always felt nervous about putting themselves out there. But something has amplified it in the modern era. Something cultural has shifted that's made the risks feel higher and the rewards feel more uncertain. And here's what many women don't understand. This isn't happening because men have gotten weaker. It's happening because the environment has changed. Men are responding rationally to a new set of incentives when the potential cost of an approach has gone up. Social humiliation, being labeled a creep, possible professional consequences, and the potential reward hasn't increased proportionally. Rational people become more cautious. That's not weakness. That's math. There's a popular idea that men have always approached women cold, walked up to strangers in bars, struck up conversations with women they've never met, pursued romantic interests through sheer boldness and charm. This is mostly a myth. Or more accurately, it's a brief historical anomaly that we've mistaken for the norm. For most of human history, and across most cultures, even today, relationships didn't start with strangers approaching each other. They grew out of existing social structures, family networks, village communities, religious congregations, shared workplaces, neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone. Your future spouse wasn't a stranger you spotted across a crowded room. She was your neighbor's daughter, your cousin's friend, the girl who attended your church, the woman your family had known for years. The cold approach, walking up to a complete stranger with romantic intent, only became common in the 20th century, and really only in certain Western urban environments. It was a product of urbanization, where people lived among strangers. It was a product of the sexual revolution, which loosened traditional courtship norms. It was a product of bars, clubs, and social spaces designed specifically for mixing with people you don't know. This was never the natural human way of finding a mate. It was a cultural experiment that lasted maybe 50 or 60 years. And now that experiment is ending, and we're surprised that people don't know how to navigate it anymore. When women ask where are all the confident men who used to approach, the honest answer is, they were always a small percentage, and the conditions that enabled them were historically unusual. The confident stranger approach was never the norm. It was a blip. Here's something else that modern people, men and women both, don't fully grasp what marriage actually was. For most of human history, marriage was not primarily about love. It was not about finding your soulmate. It was not about emotional fulfillment, or sexual compatibility, or having deep conversations late into the night. Marriage was practical. It was economic. It was about combining resources, producing children, building something stable that would survive across generations. Your spouse was not expected to be your best friend. Men had their male friends for companionship. Women had their female friends. The household was a unit of production and reproduction, not a unit of emotional support. Husbands and wives often didn't spend that much time together. They had separate spheres of work and socialization. The idea that your spouse should be your primary emotional outlet, your confidant, your therapist, your adventure partner, your intellectual equal, and your passionate lover all at once, all the time, would have seemed insane to people throughout most of history. They would have looked at that expectation and said, "That's too much for one person to carry. That's setting up both of you to fail." And they would have been right. The historical model wasn't romantic, but it was sustainable. It spread emotional and practical needs across multiple relationships rather than concentrating them all in one. Your wife handled certain things. Your friends handled others. Your family handled others. Still, no single person bore the impossible weight of being everything to someone else. Modern relationships carry a weight that no relationship in history was ever designed to bear. We expect our partner to be everything: emotional support system, intellectual companion, financial partner, co-parent, best friend, passionate lover, adventure buddy, therapist, cheerleader, and source of constant validation. We expect them to fulfill needs that used to be spread across extended family, close friendships, community ties, and religious institutions. And then we're surprised when relationships buckle under that pressure. Some couples manage it. Some people genuinely find partners who can be most of those things most of the time, and they build something beautiful together. But they're the exception, not the rule. For most people, asking one person to fill every role leads to disappointment, resentment, and eventually collapse. Men feel this pressure acutely. They're expected to be emotionally available in ways their fathers and grandfathers never were, while also being providers, protectors, and leaders. They're supposed to be vulnerable, but also strong, sensitive, but also confident, in touch with their feelings, but also stoic under pressure. The contradictions pile up until men don't know what's actually expected of them. And when they try to ask, the answer often boils down to figure it out yourself, which isn't actually an answer. Women face their own version of this. They're supposed to be independent, but also want to be provided for. Career-focused, but also family-oriented, sexually liberated, but also respectable, strong but also soft. The impossible expectations cut both ways. The difference is that men are expected to navigate these contradictions silently. When women express frustration about conflicting expectations, they find support. When men do, they're told to stop complaining and figure it out. This asymmetry doesn't help anyone. Part of what makes modern dating so confusing is that people are operating from completely different frameworks without realizing it. There are at least 3 competing scripts about what relationships should be. The first is the traditional script: practical partnerships, clear roles, family and community involvement, stability over passion, commitment as the foundation with love, hopefully growing over time. This script says, find someone suitable, build something together, and make it work. The second is the romantic script: soulmates, destiny, the one intense emotional connection. Love conquers all. This script says, find the person who makes your heart sing, and everything else will fall into place. The third is the transactional script, relationships as exchanges. What am I getting out of this? If it's not serving me, I leave. Constant evaluation of whether you're getting a good deal. This script says, optimize for your own benefit and don't settle for less than you deserve. Most modern people carry elements of all three scripts in their heads, and they clash constantly. You want the security of the traditional approach, but the passion of the romantic approach, but the freedom of the transactional approach. You want commitment and excitement, and the option to leave. Men and women often don't realize they're operating from different scripts or switching between scripts depending on the situation. He thinks they're building something traditional. She's evaluating whether he's her soulmate. She thinks they're in a romantic partnership. He's calculating the transaction. The disconnect isn't personal. It's structural. Here's an uncomfortable truth that underlies all of this. Human beings didn't evolve for modern romantic relationships. Our evolutionary history points towards serial monogamy at best. Pair bonding for a period, often until children are somewhat independent, followed by the potential for new pairings. Some anthropologists argue that mild polygyny, one man with multiple female partners, was the more common ancestral pattern. What we definitely didn't evolve for is the modern ideal. One partner for life who fulfills all our needs while we maintain complete individual freedom and self-actualization. That's a very recent cultural invention, and it fights against millions of years of evolutionary programming. This doesn't mean lifelong monogamy is impossible. Plenty of people achieve it. But it means it's harder than we pretend it is. And the failure rate isn't surprising. It's predictable. Men and women both struggle with this mismatch between what evolution shaped us for and what modern culture tells us we should want. But they struggle in different ways, and those differences create misunderstandings. Now let's talk about something specific that's broken down: signaling. In the past, women had culturally understood ways of indicating interest. A look held a moment too long, a smile in response to attention, positioning yourself near someone you wanted to talk to you. These signals weren't explicit, but they were readable. They gave men permission to approach. Those signals have become much harder to read, and in some cases, they've disappeared entirely. Part of this is deliberate. Women have been told correctly that they shouldn't have to perform interests they don't feel. They've been told that being hard to get is a strategy. They've been told that enthusiasm can be read as desperation, so they guard their signals more carefully. Part of it is environmental. Women in professional settings have learned to be more guarded because workplace dynamics require it. Women in urban environments have learned to avoid eye contact with strangers because it invites unwanted interaction. The behaviors that keep women safe in some contexts also make them unreadable in romantic contexts. And part of it is the post-Meadow shift. Men are now hyper-aware that misreading a signal can have serious consequences. An approach that's unwanted isn't just awkward. It might be reported, posted about, or treated as a violation. The margin for error has shrunk dramatically, so men wait for clearer signals. Signals that never come because women have been trained not to give them, and both sides wait. And nothing happens, and everyone wonders why dating is so hard. Now, the irony is brutal. Women want to be approached by men they're interested in. Men want to approach women who are interested in them. Both sides want the same thing. But the signaling mechanism that would connect them has been damaged by cultural forces that neither side fully controls. Some women have started to notice this and are trying to signal more clearly, but they're swimming against a cultural current that tells them that pursuing is desperate, that showing interest is giving away power, that men should just know if you're interested. The cultural programming is hard to override. There's a well-documented phenomenon in social psychology. Men tend to overestimate women's romantic interest, while women tend to underestimate men's. A woman being friendly gets interpreted by many men as flirting. A man being genuinely interested gets interpreted by many women as just being nice. The same interaction reads completely differently depending on which side you're on. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Men who erred on the side of assuming interest would pursue more opportunities and potentially reproduce more. Women who erred on the side of caution would avoid entanglements with unsuitable partners. Both biases served reproductive purposes. But in the modern context, these mismatched perceptions create constant friction. Men approach women who weren't actually interested and get rejected, or worse, accused of being inappropriate. Women wonder why men they were interested in never made a move, not realizing that their signals were too subtle to register. Add alcohol to this mix, and the misinterpretation intensifies. Men become more confident in their reads. Women become harder to read. The gap between perception and reality widens exactly when the stakes are highest. Neither side is lying or acting in bad faith. They're genuinely seeing different things. And neither side fully understands how differently the other is perceiving the exact same interaction. This perception gap has always existed, but in the past, community context helped bridge it. If you were interested in someone from your village or church, there were people who knew both of you, who could facilitate. They could clarify intentions, confirm interests, smooth over misunderstandings. Now, two strangers are trying to read each other with no context, no mediators, and mismatched perception systems. It's a recipe for confusion. Here's something men often don't fully grasp. The risk calculation is fundamentally different for women. When a man approaches a woman, the worst case for him is rejection, embarrassment, a hit to his ego, maybe getting laughed at or dismissed. When a woman receives an approach from a man, her worst case is much worse. Physical danger, stalking, harassment that escalates, violence. Women have to evaluate every male interaction with a background calculation that men rarely have to make. Is this person safe? This asymmetry explains a lot of female behavior that men find confusing or frustrating. The guardedness, the reluctance to give clear signals, the preference for meeting through trusted networks rather than cold approaches. It's not that women don't want to meet men. It's that they're managing risks that men don't have to think about. Young women especially face a complicated situation. They're learning to navigate male attention. At the same time, they're learning their own power and appeal. They often underestimate how much attention they're attracting and from whom. They make choices about self-presentation without fully understanding all the eyes that will be watching. This isn't about blame. It's about the fact that men and women are navigating the same interactions with completely different risk profiles. And those different risks produce different behaviors that the other side doesn't always understand. Men need to understand that female caution is often survival-based, not personal. Women need to understand that male hesitation is often fear-based, not lack of interest. Neither side is trying to frustrate the other. They're both trying to protect themselves in different ways. There's a cultural battle happening around all of this, and it's making things worse. On one side, there's a progressive framework that emphasizes freedom, consent, and women's autonomy. This framework says women should be able to do whatever they want, wear whatever they want, go wherever they want, and men should simply learn to control themselves. Any suggestion that women might adapt their behavior for safety gets labeled as victim blaming. On the other side, there's a more traditional framework that emphasizes prudence, risk awareness, and realistic expectations. This framework says the world contains dangers, and smart people, men and women, adjust their behavior to account for those dangers. Acknowledging risk isn't blaming victims, it's navigating reality. The progressive framework wins most public debates because it sounds better. It's more compassionate. It puts responsibility where it ideally belongs, on the people causing harm, not the people experiencing it. But the traditional framework has an advantage too. It actually works in the real world. Ideals about how things should be don't protect anyone from how things actually are, and refusing to discuss risk management because it sounds like victim blaming leaves people, especially young people, less prepared for reality. Parents feel this tension acutely. They want to warn their daughters about risks without making them feel responsible for male behavior. They want to teach their sons to be respectful without making them afraid to express interest at all. The cultural conversation doesn't give them good tools for these discussions. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. You can't have everything. You can't have complete freedom and complete safety. You can't have zero misunderstandings and zero awkwardness. You can't have men who confidently approach and men who never make unwanted advances. You can't have women who signal clearly and women who are never assumed to be available when they're not. Every social arrangement involves trade-offs. The traditional approach, relationships mediated through family and community, provided safety and vetting, but limited freedom. The modern approach, meeting strangers, individual choice, freedom to date anyone, provides freedom, but removes the vetting mechanisms that used to protect people. We've chosen freedom. We've dismantled most of the traditional structures. And now we're dealing with the consequences of that choice, while pretending we can somehow have freedom without its costs. Men who approach strangers will sometimes misread signals. That's the cost of a system where strangers can approach each other. Women who want to be approached by men they're interested in will sometimes be approached by men they're not interested in. That's the cost of a system where interest has to be expressed before it can be confirmed. The progressive framework rarely has to defend its trade-offs because it deals in ideals. The world should be a certain way. People should behave a certain way. Anyone who points out that the world doesn't work that way is accused of making excuses for bad behavior. And building social norms around how things should be, rather than how they are, leaves everyone confused and frustrated. The honest conversation would acknowledge that every social arrangement has costs. Traditional arrangements limited freedom, but provided structure and safety. Modern arrangements provide freedom, but require individuals to navigate complexity without guidance. Neither is perfect. Both have trade-offs. Pretending otherwise helps no one. So, what is it that modern women don't understand about men? They don't understand the fear, not fear of rejection. Men have always dealt with that fear of being misinterpreted, fear of being labeled, fear that expressing interest has become a risky act that could have consequences beyond just hearing no. They don't understand the confusion. Men have received a lifetime of mixed messages. Be confident but not aggressive. Make the first move, but make sure she's interested first. Be masculine but not toxic. Lead but also defer. Express emotion but also be strong. The contradictions are endless, and every wrong step seems to trigger criticism. They don't understand the withdrawal. When men stop approaching, stop pursuing, stop putting themselves out there, it's not because they've become weak. It's because they've calculated the cost and decided it's not worth it. That calculation might be wrong, but it's not irrational given what they're observing. They don't understand that the signals they think they're sending aren't being received. A woman who thinks she's being obviously interested might be coming across as simply polite. A woman who thinks she's being approachable might be radiating "leave me alone" without realizing it. The gap between intent and perception is massive, and they don't understand that. Men are also struggling with the impossible expectations of modern relationships. They're also confused about what's expected of them. They're also trying to navigate a world that doesn't come with clear rules anymore. To be fair, let's flip it. What don't men understand about women? They don't fully grasp the risk calculation. Every interaction with an unknown man carries a background threat assessment that most men never have to perform. The guardedness isn't personal. It's protective. They don't understand why signals have become so subtle. Women aren't trying to be confusing. They're trying to navigate a world where being too forward gets you labeled. Being too available gets you devalued. And being too clear can attract the wrong kind of attention. They don't understand the pressure women face too. The expectation to be attractive but not too sexual, to be interested but not desperate, to want commitment but also be cool with keeping things casual. Women are dealing with their own set of contradictory demands. Both sides are confused. Both sides are frustrated. Both sides think the other has it easier. Neither side is right. So, where does this leave us? With a mess, honestly. A dating landscape where the old rules have been dismantled and the new rules haven't been established. Where men and women are operating from different scripts, perceiving interactions differently, and managing different risks, all while expecting each other to just figure it out. The title of this video is, Modern Women Don't Understand Men Anymore. That's true, but the reverse is equally true. Modern men don't understand women anymore either. The disconnect isn't because one side is wrong and the other is right. It's because we're all navigating a new environment with outdated maps. We're trying to use evolutionary instincts in a world those instincts weren't designed for. We're carrying competing scripts about what relationships should be, and we don't even realize when we're switching between them. The solution isn't to go back to traditional arrangements. That ship has sailed. But it's also not to keep pretending that the current approach is working, when clearly it isn't. Maybe the solution starts with acknowledging the disconnect, recognizing that the person across from you is dealing with pressures and fears and confusions that you don't fully understand, extending some grace for the fact that nobody really knows what they're doing anymore. Men and women have been figuring out how to be together for millions of years. We'll figure this out too. But it's going to require honesty about what's actually happening, not what we wish was happening. And it's going to require both sides to stop assuming the worst about each other. Men aren't all predators. Women aren't all manipulators. Most people are just confused humans trying to find connection in a confusing time. A little grace on both sides would go a long way.